for this. What I do is I'm Chief Operating Officer of Exploit Hub. I sell penetration testing tools, and the company's based in Austin, Texas, and we're a sub-company of a group called NSS Labs. I am also, I'm part-time with two companies. My other company, I'm with Recursion Ventures out in New York City, and I'm the DC office for both of these companies. And we do a lot of red team work, breaking systems, and then engineering fixes for them. And that's what I do full time. I'm an attorney. I have I like software. I'm just getting into hardware engineering type of work. And I've been in the hacking community for about 10 years now. So I'm glad to meet a lot of local people here because I just moved to this area about a year ago. So another reason that I'm excited this space is opening up so I can get to know all of you who have an interest similar to my own. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is this. One of my projects that I do is being in the hacking community and also I'm an attorney, by the way, is I try to work out very specific workarounds or issues that some of us in the community have when we're working on research projects. A lot of us do work that's in what we call in law the gray area. How to define what the gray area is and how to know when you're kind of proceeding into an area that may be illegal is something that I consult, I talk to people about. One of the things that I've been researching for the past 9 years, in fact, is the concept of data havens. Where do you put stuff? If a particular country has restrictions on some material, some data, where do you put it? And what this presentation is not going to be about is, I'm not going to be talking about WikiLeaks for an hour. Obviously, this is a very interesting example, and I've been following a lot of the news very closely, so I know a lot about the WikiLeaks cases. I have about 5 slides on WikiLeaks, and I'll be happy to answer questions about it, but I'm not doing a whole presentation on WikiLeaks. I'm doing a presentation on the concept of data havens, where stuff can be put, and the laws associated with that, both civil and criminal.
Might be a resolution issue. It looks like it's doing it's doing some kind of weird stretching with the 4x3.
Oh, it is? Okay.
But, yeah, because that's coming up square up there.
All right. It's still.
Yeah, that's odd. Because it looks, when you leave
Can you see it in the back? You're okay? All right. Is that?
Roll with it.
Work with it. All right. That's Recursion Ventures out of New York City. This is Exploit Hub. If you write exploits or want to purchase exploits, come talk to me. We're setting this up for individual pen testers, small companies, big companies, governments, whatever. Depending on what you need for exploits, we have them. My background is I've been everywhere. And frankly, my educational background is not as important to the stuff I do now as the experience that I have. But I have a business background, I'm an attorney, and I also do a lot with CS. Oops, did I just turn it off? Hello? Okay. I'm a professor, an adjunct professor at the University of Maine. Yes, I fly to Maine to teach a class 1 night a week in the computer science department. I love teaching, and I really want to get more people into learning computer science from a hacker's perspective. That's what I've been hired to teach at the university, and it's a lot of fun. I teach my students to be, or at least think like hackers, and I'm about to do the same for law students next year. We need more attorneys who really kind of get it. So I'm setting up one of the first programs for computer security law at the University of Maine. So we'll begin to get some attorneys coming out and helping us in our community and in the corporations in which we work who understand. I also do some car access research. I like car computers a lot, and that's a whole nother presentation, but that's part of what I'm bringing here to the hackerspace, is we're going to be accessing cars. Actually, my father, who's here, is going to be presenting after me. He was one of my inspirations for what I do now. Since I was a kid, my dad did red team projects. He would be hired to break into places so other people can't break into places, and he'll tell you more about that during his presentation. But we just co-authored a book with many chapters. A lot of other people have co-authored, but I wrote one on cybercrimes and hacking, and he wrote one that's more about, actually the presentation you're going to see now is related to what he published in Security in 2020. I've been featured in Popular Mechanics for my car hacking research. I presented at a bunch of conferences. Can you guys see the bottom? Is the table blocking it, or?
Oh, we have it jacked up in the back also because of before. We can move it.
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure. Some of my slides go down to the bottom of the cell, so.
Unfortunately, kind of.
Okay. One thing that a lot of us know in this community, and when I talk to attorneys, is they don't, some attorneys and people that do more management work for technical companies, there really are no more borders. This is something that I believe that some attorneys especially, and lawmakers have a hard time understanding, is that there's no wall you can build around the internet access that we have here in the US. I'll talk a little bit about that. China has something that's similar, but their internet is set up differently than ours has been. Ours has been more organic than theirs, which has been specifically engineered for filters and walls. But I'm talking about really how information really can't stay in just one place where you want it to be. There's some safeguards technically that you need to take, but legally right now, the law and legislation is a little bit behind. What we want to do to try to keep data here in this country is difficult. And I'll tell you, the DMCA isn't doing it. And I have a lot of opinions about the DMCA. I'll share some of that with you. And for those of you who don't know, that's the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Also, there are no more secrets. No, shall I say, I don't want to get into a political discussion about WikiLeaks about the secrets. I wrote this presentation and did a lot of this before the recent events with WikiLeaks, the arrest of Julian Assange. But some organizations may need secrets. How much, I don't really want to debate, but the example I'm trying to show here is how you can get information in and out of places, and it's very hard to catch this stuff. I mean, many months back when I was talking to some developers for Tor, how they were trying to get Tor into some countries where it wasn't, they wanted people to be able to bypass the filters, but they couldn't just put Tor on people's computers because you couldn't access it over the internet. Developers from Tor were bringing in what they could inside of coins and examples like this to try to get some countries to using Tor so they can share more information. The synopsis of the presentation is, this is what I'm talking about, walls, data being able to be moved around quickly, and what constitutes a country. This is changing, and I predict in the next 10 years, this is going to be a big change in how we conceptualize your citizenship, where data comes from, where data is going, and actually while it's in transit, where the jurisdiction is for whether it's criminal or civil cases is going to be very difficult, as we're seeing right now, as the US is trying to extradite someone from Sweden, well, UK to Sweden and then here. It's very hard to do. And I'll be talking about licensing as opposed to hard intellectual property protection. I see that in the next 10 years, things may be shifting. It's very expensive and very complicated to enforce patents, for instance. If a company needs to sue on a patent, it's at least $100,000 for an American company to defend against it or to, a suit for another company. If the model's changed a bit to go from hardcore suing infringers to a licensing, type of a licensing model, it's going to make things a little bit different of how we conceptualize intellectual property and how it is shared. The cyber police are having a difficult time actually catching up with what's going on. They're going to have to change some of the ways in which they work as well, and I hope that, and I have invited members from this community here to these presentations so they can learn about what we're talking about and see how from inside they might be able to make some changes within their own organizations. And there's an interesting thing that I've been following for quite a while. It's not as expensive as it used to be, but the concept of putting a data haven in the middle of the ocean in international waters really is going to change the way that we conceptualize if there's a platform built, there are a lot of servers on that platform, how do the other countries get jurisdiction to get data off that if they want to? And I'm going to be talking about something I've been following for a long time, Sealand and Havenco. They don't exist anymore. But that doesn't mean to say that they're not going to, especially with recent events, how things have changed, that they're not going to be something that will happen in the future. Other platforms, and I think it will be. All right, so I didn't draw this picture. This is Pirate Bay. Pirate Bay drew this, and if you can't see in the back, they have, Sealand is right there on the left-hand side. They tried to purchase Sealand, which is off the coast of the UK. And this is the Pirate Bay, including the lawyer's gallows on the far right-hand side. This is kind of how they feel some restrictions of where they're working, even within Sweden. And Sweden has some very liberal laws about about freedom. I don't want to say freedom of speech because they don't have the First Amendment like we do all clearly, but they have concepts of data sharing that's different than what we have here. So it's become a place where people have put some of their content, and I have too, purposely, and I'll tell you why when I get to that slide. This is as deep as I'm going to get into the philosophy of liberty and freedom. The concept of who owns your property. Is it the country with which you have citizenship? Is it where you have your servers? Is it freely when information, speech is being exchanged over the internet? The concept of diversity of opinions and free speech was kind of set by someone who had a lot to do with the establishment of our country, Mills. All right, share openly, freely, or not. As an attorney, when I started in law school, we had no classes on open source and free software licensing. It was one of these things that they knew existed, but attorneys really had a hard time understanding. Well, how can you protect something? How can you control it if it's something that's open or free? Free was even a harder concept. Free is in free beer, or free is in liberty, as Richard Stallman would say. It's free is in liberty. Now, a lot of lawyers are learning, and they have to learn about this. I mean, I deal with open source and free software licensing all the time. Those exploits that all of you are writing that I'm getting, I see chunks of free software and open source code in there. The licenses still need to be followed, and attribution at the least for some of them. And understanding that when we're creating products, hardware or software, you're making a choice now that 10 years ago, the legal system and attorneys had a hard time conceptualizing why would you want to release something free or open? How do you make money off of that? And as things, I've seen a lot more software move toward open and free right now, at least open. This changes the way in which we conceptualize property ownership and the data. Where is it being stored? Who owns it? Concepts of sharing. I mean, I have everything up here from like Napster, like old school Napster, and BitTorrent and Open Source Alliance. Open source and free software are changing the way that we store our data as well, and how we share it. So the intellectual property protection industry is really, they had a hard time, like the MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, Recording Industry of America. I mean, they're still beginning to change their business models. But 10 years after Napster, they're still taking people to court over this stuff when instead, and I'm not saying, at least from the traditional copyright sense, it was copyright violation when this stuff was going on, at least in the way in which it was being transferred and stored on people's computers, but their business models need to change. And 10 years later, their models haven't changed a great deal. All right, and this is my son, actually, in case you can't read the t-shirts. Hacker in training. Geek is chic. I mean, being a hacker is actually, I love this community. I love the concepts and the ideas that you all have. I mean, you are coming up with some of the most innovative ideas now that are changing our industry in ways in which the big think tank corporations aren't catching up. And I like that the ideas of the cypherpunks, the people working on crypto and the cyberpunks are really changing stuff, and the wares community, for better or for worse, has really changed the way that some companies like big open source, no, didn't mean open source, big operating system type of corporations, which will remain unnamed, how they're handling responsible disclosures we give them. So, also the concept of what we're doing with social media, what are you doing right now? This has a lot to do with who owns that information. When you post on Twitter, when you post on Facebook, where is that data being stored? Who owns those tweets, those posts on Facebook? The terms of service agreements where everyone's fighting over with Facebook, the privacy. I mean, I believe that we're shifting more toward a place where sharing and saying, hey, I'm putting my tweets up publicly. If people access that and they find out information about me or about what you're working on, and it's a public statement, I put that information out there to share. It's not something that I can obtain or want my exclusive rights, ownership over all my tweets. I've given it up to Twitter, and I do that when I sign their TOS or their click-through agreement. But the nexus between intellectual property and cybercrimes is pretty much this. Speech contained in the source code is protected under the First Amendment. I hope you know that. This is your speech. Even though the code per se is not as protected as high as political speech is. Oh, you don't need to answer that phone. You don't need to answer the phone. Just let it ring. Sorry. pull the plug. Sorry about that. But the speech that you are writing in your code is protected as speech. It used to be before, I think that case came out in the 1980s. They said, well, anyone can write code. It's like that thing with monkeys typing on a typewriter can all come up with. You all know that 10 different people can write source code 10 different ways. That's your creative input. It's protectable, it's your speech, and you do get First Amendment protection for that. It's a lower level than political speech, which does get the highest. But the US Supreme Court will uphold the declaration that source code is speech protected under the First Amendment. So if you have that speech, you want to say something, where do you put it? So there's no place like home. One of the places that I love to watch to see where people are setting up businesses, economies. I mean, I even read a comment that recently some of the DDoS attacks that were going on were being organized in World of Warcraft. Some of the command and control structures for the bots are in World of Warcraft. They're in virtual worlds. The interesting thing about virtual worlds is while law enforcement is in there, they're trying to see what's going on to catch up with how groups are formed. When you purchase a piece of property in Second Life, you have a right to that because you've paid for it, but that still belongs to Linden Labs, which is the organizer. They own Second Life. So you sort of have a lease on property in there. And one of the first online virtual world terrorism examples took place in Second Life. A group purchased land on an island that belonged to Linden Labs, and then they blew it up. They blew it up by creating very disruptive code that destroyed that island. No one could get there, no one could leave. It caused a lot of havoc, but it was a very fascinating example of where you're going into other realms, and you can have some speech, you can say what you need to say, but when it moves to something like this where you're destroying, you bought that island, but it belongs really to Linden Labs. Likewise, the way this works in the real world example that I'll discuss is, even if you have an offshore platform, depending on how that platform is connected to actually the continental shelf and how close it is to offshore, is that really your platform, even though you're purchasing the materials? What if you put stuff on there? How do people access it? How does the government say, hey, we have a subpoena, we have a warrant we want to serve? How does this happen in Second Life is something that they're still working out. I mean, they're still chasing the IP addresses to find people. They're still serving Linden Labs and other types of organizations like this with subpoenas for information about account and users. But as you know, it's not particularly difficult to set up anonymous usernames, accounts. Anonymity is not impossible to do online. But what's hard for the government enforcement to really get a hold of is how do they find who is there, who owns this property, who did it. And they're catching up because technology so far has been way ahead of law enforcement and legislation and the attorneys for the companies that work for these. But actually, yesterday I had lunch with an attorney who his focus he works for a very big law firm here in the DC area. I mean, it's internationally huge. They have a practice group focus just for virtual worlds. I mean, if you got your e-gold stolen, you go to them, they'll help you get it back. I mean, that's just, I love that idea that even the big law firms are beginning to catch on that this is where stuff is happening. Strict intellectual property laws. This did not actually become law, but it could have. And for those of you in the back who can't read it, U.S. Attorney General Gonzalez proposed criminalizing attempts to infringe intellectual property in order to meet the global challenges of IP crime with the Intellectual Property Protection Act of 2007. I'm really glad this did not become legislation, but it almost did, because all of us, we should really keep an eye on what legislation is coming down the pipeline, because once it's passed, it's almost impossible to undo later. I'm working on changing and actually trying to augment the Digital Millennium Copyright Act now, but it's extremely difficult. Before this stuff gets passed, get involved. As the hacking community really, we need to not let we don't need another DMCA. This would have been even worse. It was criminalized not-for-profit illicit copying with no evidence of actual copying. That's really ridiculous. I mean, I'm glad these are some of the reasons it didn't become law, but it was close. And when we have a U.S. Attorney General recommending this, I would like to think that he didn't really understand how it would affect the industry, how it would affect our projects. But some of these things, like create a new crime for life imprisonment for knowingly using pirated software. That's a big deal. Permitting more wiretaps for privacy investigations and increase the penalties under the DMCA, the anti-circumvention measures. Right now, under the DMCA, fair use is kind of it's dying. As an academic, as a professor, I have DMCA issues almost every single day that I teach, because I have to think, is this code or this encryption that we're reverse engineering or we're talking about breaking, can I talk to students about my research? Can I publish it? And I actually, every time I have to catch myself and think, am I teaching people to break the anti-circumvention measures so we can learn how to design them better? Yeah, sometimes I can't talk about it and I can't publish. I still can't publish some of my car research, which is academic, but it's not fair use because of the DMCA. And here is the DMCA. There's a group downtown in DC called Public Knowledge, and they're working on amending the anti-circumvention measures for the DMCA, and I'm working on the takedown notices aspect of the DMCA through case law that is in federal courts right now. EFF is assisting us with the case. They're not lead attorneys on the case. We are, but we're very grateful to have some of that help. The DMCA criminalizes creation and sharing of copyrighted material obtained by circumventing technological measures, DRM. So that's what I'm talking about. For example, in some of the car computer access projects that we do, even if the crypto is like a simple challenge response, tiny key, challenge response, unlimited number of times, if we do that to get to what's running on your car that you've purchased, that you have something like a black box, more or less, that's running on your car if it's newer than 2001. You don't know what data that's storing. It can be accessed by law enforcement, but with a proper warrant. So it's not something that can just plug into your OBD2 port and take it. But you can't see that code. You can't talk about it if you have seen that code, and you certainly can't publish about it. That's one of the problems we have with the DMCA and the hacking community, and one of the reasons why the provision that I actually have been challenging is the takedown notices as well. I've had to move some stuff to Sweden for a case we're doing, and I presented about that at Black Hat last summer, because we just had so many issues with the DMCA. My clients were not breaking the law, it was speech. They wanted the speech here in the US and they couldn't do it, so we put something in Sweden. And it's happening. And since then we haven't had takedown notices as frequently, because we said, take your US DMCA takedown notices to Sweden and see if PRQ is going to respond to them. And I think you know the answer to that. We're not obstructing justice, we're just, hey, if they want to file an international case to silence speech that's being done in Sweden, they can. It's not easy to do right now. That may be changing in the future, but not at the moment. And this is what we were getting around. One of my students at the university created a website, and the particular case we're doing, and I won't mention names, although it is in federal court right now. You can look it up, you can watch my presentation if you want, from Black Hat last summer. But we gave up our safe harbor. My student has an ISP, we do hosting, and it's in California. The Ninth Circuit in California generally is good for these cases, better than here, so we have servers, and the company does a lot of operations in California. We gave up the safe harbor provision and said, okay, sue us. We're not taking down the material that you're telling us is copyright infringement. And so the person suing us is a medical professional, in fact, in this area. And our clients for the ISP and the hosting company have a website that we're critiquing his skills, some of the stuff that he did. People have died from some of his medical procedures, and whenever someone would post a website saying, hey, my child died from that, we'd get slammed with DMCA takedown notices, hundreds. I mean, they just would keep coming. Every 7 days, the statutory period, we'd take the website down, put it back up, we'd get another DMCA notice over and over again. And that's when we said, we can't change the law. We're fighting this in court with the pro bono attorneys like myself, which it's extremely time consuming. We're moving everything to Sweden. And since we did, the website has been up 100% of the time, and we have not had any more problems. And I don't look at this as such as, we're not fighting the war with, music and copying movies. This is speech about people who say, I don't agree with what you're doing or your practice, and we couldn't say it in the US because the DMCA prevented us, so we moved it. And so we gave up our safe harbor provision. And that's why the concepts of data havens, it's not a totally, it's not a concept that's very foreign to freedom. I mean, the concept of saying, hey, we're going to form our own group, our own community, and do our own thing. It does have some purposes, just like, I can't get into discussion particularly about it, but there's some aspects to sharing information that you have or someone may have that needs to be said or get out there to help other people. So, US versus European copyright laws, I had to consider this. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so I don't sound too bad. But European copyright laws, I had to consider some of this when we put our boxes in Sweden, just to figure out, well, what requirements would it take when they, if someone did come from information on our computer. They have a copyright directive in the Electronic Commerce Directive of 2001. This is for the EU countries, that is. The UK has something that is a little bit frightening to me, and it's not full law yet, but it's getting there. It's kind of affectionately called the cut them off copyright enforcement. Excuse me, so the way it works is if your ISP gets takedown notices similar to our DMCA, which is not what they have over there, but it's similar, they can just cut off your internet access. And they'll do it, it says here that the copyright holder can collect IP addresses of alleged infringers. The account holders of those IP addresses will be identified via a court order, so it's not just like your ISP turning over your information, but court orders are depending, well, how shall I say this? They're not always the highest bar of getting that information. It's not the most difficult thing to do to get a court order. And the ISP will handicap, like cut your connection like almost down to nothing, or cut off your internet access completely. And depending on how your court case goes, when you do go to court for this, they could cut off your internet access for your name or your house or whatever for 6 months to a year or just forever, it seems like. They will block portions of IP addresses, and this is nothing new to people who work in IT. When I was in United Arab Emirates, doing this presentation actually for Black Hat Abu Dhabi, we did some interesting tests. We tried to see if we could access any sites in Israel. We could not. And we didn't particularly, we were warned actually beforehand, if you mess with their firewall, if you mess with stuff at the conference, they won't help us. So we just did some testing, but we didn't go beyond that. But they're blocking destinations in the UK, potentially they could under this law, such as Pirate Bay. Italy is doing this as well. And there are other countries that we consider to be similar to the US to have the type of free speech, type of sharing of information. But when you block stuff like Pirate Bay, one of the questions that the court looks at is, does this site substantially infringe copyright? Well, that can be a subjective question because there are a lot of things on Pirate Bay that are not violating people's copyrights. You have a band, you want to put your song up, go put it up on Pirate Bay, that's your choice. But to say that you can't do that because someone else might take some big band in the US that has a lot of copyright in their music and doesn't want it on Pirate Bay, limits what you can do. And of course, here is Pirate Bay. I have a whole slideshow about Pirate Bay pictures that I talk to my students a lot about this because some of them don't know that in the US, if you do get some copyrighted material off Pirate Bay, it can cause you some problems. I mean, one of the labs that we have at the university, this is one of the IP addresses, or the addresses that we block is students going to Pirate Bay. And I think that filters like that are kind of unfortunate because it doesn't let people to choose to do non-infringing stuff with it. It just says if you go there, you're bad. And that's pretty broad blanket to throw over some of this stuff. Because some of my students are putting their code up there for people to check out and use for free. I mean, there are a lot of people accessing it, but so it's a good way to get your work out there. But I've done some work on Pirate Bay. What's interesting is, as you may know, the political party, the Pirate Party, came before Pirate Bay and their servers and all that. But these are some of their objectives, which are, I thought I'd put up here for you to consider. Promoting global legislation to facilitate the emerging information society. And for copyright, they claim that today's copyright system is unbalanced, and that's why they do some of the things that they do. I love this picture. If you can't see it, it's an iPod, and it says, filled with tons of music from the Pirate Bay. And it's etched into the back of an iPod. Privatization, monopolies are one of the society's worst enemies, hence the position that patents are obsolete and should be gradually abolished. There is, in the past 5 years in the US, we've been talking about changing patent law. It is very slow, it's happening very slow, but I mean, we're trying to change some of the ways that software patents are handled here. But they're just saying, well, they're going to do something more radical. And as a political party, this is their platform. And for privacy, they say that all attempts to curtail these rights of privacy must be questioned and met with powerful opposition. Hence their position that anti-terror laws nullify due process and risk being used as repressive tools. And again, this is not to say that I agree with everything from the Pirate Bay, but this is what the political party has done. And as a result, is a place where they want to go. I mean, where do you go when you're not welcome? Where do you go when you're the Pirate Bay and you're being told you need to move your stuff out of Sweden, or if they are told that? Well, you can move your websites or links to that may potentially have infringing material. Yes, just sort of.
Questions okay?
Yeah, okay, go ahead. You ask a question. Yeah.
Pirate Bay doesn't really store data, right? They store metadata about where other data might be. So you're really not uploading your stuff to Pirate Bay. You're uploading a link to information about how to access other information that may be located in lots of different places, and in fact usually is broadly distributed all over the place.
Okay, so the question is, for those of you who couldn't hear, or if it's being recorded, you don't actually upload a big chunk. I mean, your whole file isn't going up on Pirate Bay on a centralized server that you can access the information. It's metadata, and it's how to get to that information. And sometimes it's broken up into pieces around the world, really, which is fascinating. They are facilitating in the way that the Swedish government has had issues, and I'll get to their criminal case in just one moment. Is that they're facilitating access to potentially infringing material, and because they're providing the gateway, it's a gateway. I hate to make that analogy, but the gateway to get that information. That's why, that's one of the reasons why the government is having in Sweden a difficult problem with this. And because they are on, and really the backbone for the internet access, that they do have a lot of computing resources in Sweden, that's how the government's been able to get jurisdiction over what they do, is their stuff is in Sweden. A lot of their computers that do set the metadata, they are there. Some countries have fewer restrictions on internet access and content hosted within their countries. For example, if any of you have lived in South America, their laws are very different than ours. Does that make it okay for you to take material here, whether it's infringing or it's speech that may not be particularly popular, and put it in South America? That's really the essence of the research I'm doing in this question, is how it's not just a question of law, but it's ethics, and also logistically, this is hard to do. It's expensive, it can be. In fact, South America, one country so far publicly has announced that they will take WikiLeaks and they will host the servers, some of the servers for WikiLeaks, and actually welcome Julian Assange, and that's, I believe that's Ecuador. And they're making a statement that they don't agree with all the policies that we have here in the US because their laws are different. And how the U.S. gets jurisdiction over that, I mean, how would we say, no, we're not going to do that? Or if you have someone in Ecuador that we want to extradite for criminal procedures, criminal process, it's difficult. Oh yeah, so here, this is the computer. I showed this. I didn't use this particular computer in Abu Dhabi because it's very old. I love it. It's breaking. But I use Tor for a lot. And I'm sure everyone in here knows what Tor is, so I don't really need to go into a lot of detail about it, but it's an anonymizer. It's not crypto. It doesn't you can't protect everything with crypto just with Tor, because it doesn't do that. But it anonymizes where you're coming from and where you're going with like a hop in the middle. It's an onion router system. And there's some countries that they're saying don't use Tor. You're not allowed to use Tor. Well, here in the U.S., not a huge, but a significant percentage of Tor is actually law enforcement here in the U.S. And they love and they hate Tor at the same time. They have a very hard time finding out where Tor addresses are coming from. Extremely difficult. But on the other hand, they use it for their research as well, for the same reasons. The example that I found of when the U.S. government started using Tor quite a bit was the FBI was doing an investigation to bust a child porn ring. They had their, really the internet access for that division was in the FBI's building in Quantico. So when their agents got online posing as children or as purchasers of people who will share child pornography, all the child porn ring had to do was really look up, and they went around to find, hey, that's the FBI. That's okay. We're gonna oust those people as agents, and their whole investigation was destroyed. And then they started using Tor, and now it's changed. So I like to think that they are putting money into Tor as well. anonymously or not, because they use it. I saw some statistics that Jake, one of the developers for Tor, Jake Applebaum, gave me, that 25% of Tor traffic every day is law enforcement. We love it and hate it for the same reasons. But when you have stuff in other countries, offshore platforms, besides Tor being slow, and people have given presentations on that, that's one of the ways in which a lot of access can be done. And if you are accessing material that's illegal in the country, for instance in Iran, if you're trying to access stuff about, even in China, the books that are on that, what they call the yellow list, if you want to read them on Amazon, I mean, you got to they're using Tor. And Tor is hard to access actually in China right now because the government's caught onto it, but there are other ways to do it with proxy servers. And this is the last portion of my presentation where I'm going to be talking about land-based data havens, Iceland, Sweden, and the Netherlands. So there have been recent advancements with stuff that's going on in Iceland. They're going to have, and it's not here yet, they're going to have one of the most broad laws about freedom of sharing information and freedom of speech. Their laws are going to be the most generous in the world, and they haven't quite been passed yet, last time I checked. But what's interesting is one of the people who has been really into changing the laws in Sweden to make it a place where it will be a data haven is the guy that's taking Julian Assange's place as interim director of WikiLeaks. His name is Kristen, I can't pronounce his last name. I'm very sorry about that, but if you look it up, he's an investigative reporter. So reporters care a great deal about how to share some of this information. He's been with WikiLeaks for a while, but he's in Iceland, and he's had a lot to do with this new law that's coming and will be coming into effect in Iceland soon. Sweden and the Netherlands are also places where they have very generous laws about information sharing. However, Sweden is, while their laws do say that, there's some technicalities, and I don't want to get into the details of Julian Assange's case, but while they're not picking him up on these laws about information sharing, it's on something else. And that's one of the issues that they're having right now with WikiLeaks, clearly. But they've already moved some of their servers to Iceland, and I don't know if we have internet access yet. Do we have Wi-Fi up? No. Okay. I'm not going to be able to show you the video for this, but I know a little bit about how their servers are set up in Sweden just through public records, information that I've found for research purposes. But what's interesting is they have a whistleblower protection law, and this is initially why WikiLeaks set up their stuff in Sweden, is if you are whistleblowing on information from government entities, and what they'll do is they will protect that information if it stays up. And the servers, Swedish authorities will not take down a site that is protected unless the servers can be seized in conjunction with criminal allegations. However, the interesting thing is Assange, when he initially released the helicopter video that we all know of that I saw for the first time at Hackers on Planet Earth this summer in July, after Jake's presentation, is he may not have filed in time for that, which is pretty curious. When he realized he needed to file, and you do need to either be a citizen of Sweden or a resident of Sweden, his residency at the time was pending, so they were holding on to that protection for Assange. Now that his residency has actually been denied, his residency application, as soon as that happened, he was looking for a new place to go. And to go possibly to take the servers as well, because they would then be vulnerable, because perhaps it hasn't been tested yet, because like I said, he's been picked up on stuff other than the whistleblowing protection that they have in Sweden. But he was denied residency in Sweden October 18th, and that's when a lot of the other legal actions against Assange started really picking up. WikiLeaks is somewhat underground, although they have 2 server locations. One of them that is, this is Bahnhof, and I'm not going to be able to show you the video, unfortunately, but I have the link in my presentation. You can go to it, take a look at it. But way before the WikiLeaks stuff started, a group, I think from this area actually, did a tour of different kinds of places to store data. And this is an interesting one. The Pirate Party's in there, WikiLeaks is in there, and they share resources. They don't say this is the purpose, but it does increase the difficulty the US must undertake to seize and access the WikiLeaks servers. But the assertion is that the servers are in a bunker 98 feet underground in the mountains outside of Stockholm. It was built as a bomb shelter in 1943, and there are a lot of other data havens that are like this. They're bomb shelters, but this one's interesting that they were able to get a lot of internet connectivity, and a lot actually. But it was turned into a bunker in case of nuclear war during the 1970s. From what I understand from the presentation, it's also hardened, which is kind of cool. They have some shielding, so if there is nuclear war, the servers probably will be fine down in there. But it's been used by the internet hosting company Bonhoeffer. It's protected by 30 meters of rock, steel doors, backup generators, and when you watch the video, I'm sorry I can't show you even the first 5 minutes, I mean, this place is immense. They have and it's also very well funded. I mean, they have a conference room that's kind of like a floating glass room. It looks like just from like Superman or something. It's very beautiful. But Netcraft showed that the site, WikiLeaks, as we know now, but back when I started doing these presentations, we knew it was being mirrored somewhere, but we didn't know where. One of those mirroring sites is most likely here, actually, in Reston, Virginia. One of their tweets showed that, and people started doing some research. And yeah, indeed, it looks like at the Equinix facility, WikiLeaks is having their servers mirrored here in this area. No one knows quite by whom, but it's clearly here. But when they do the mirroring, there were some cases, including with mirroring sites. There was an interesting case within the hacking community of 2600 where Eric Corley was mirroring DECSS. And the court held that he was, you still could not mirror. If DECSS is for cracking encryption for predominantly copyright infringement purposes, that really pissed off the courts, and it pissed off the corporate attorneys for the MPAA. So WikiLeaks is being mirrored here. That is not a solution, as most of you in the room know, to jurisdiction hopping. If the stuff is here and you're mirroring it, what's going over that server, you can get jurisdiction as soon as it touches here in the US. That's one of the reasons why the state of Virginia has that's sounding really bad.
I'm not sure I'm not sure how his microphone system even works.
Okay. This is this.
This will be my concern.
Let's turn that off for a second. Maybe a volume adjusted. I'm thinking we're getting feedback, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds okay.
All right. I turned it down too low. Do we hear?
Batteries in it though?
Well, I have it on. If I push it all the way forward, it's mute.
There, just trying to click.
Do we have anybody in the room that knows about technology?
I turned this knob on with the assumption it was volume. Maybe it wasn't. I think I hear people.
Okay, it's fine
Speak
now.
myself.
All right, who knows what that interference was? All right, I was stating that Virginia has very strict cyber crimes laws because and I know there's some employees here from AOL, which is when AOL was a very, very big company, and a lot of the internet access came through the pipes really here in Virginia, the tubes, shall we say. Virginia decided that they wanted jurisdiction over a lot of cyber crimes laws, so we have very strict and encompassing cybercrime laws and ways in which you can get jurisdiction over this here in the U.S. So if is it me? Is it the battery? Okay, I'm not going to move.
I'm going to just stand right there.
Yeah, I'm not going to move at all. Okay, so Virginia wants to get jurisdiction over this stuff. It's coming through here, and that's one of the ways they do it. If I was WikiLeaks, I wouldn't have put stuff in Virginia, but I'm not. So good for them. Here's the video. I can't show you because I don't have internet access here, but it's really good. Okay, so another way that I've seen stuff in data havens used to get a difficult time getting jurisdiction. If you mix your code, your speech, whatever it is, with political speech, in most countries, one of the things that they do, I know that Pirate Bay has already done this. They're mixing in the content for WikiLeaks with the political speech. So when there are proper warrants, equivalent of warrants and subpoenas in Sweden issued, the law enforcement has to go through and pick out, kind of like shut a blind eye to the political stuff for the pirate party. And that was a very interesting way in which they have made it harder to get jurisdiction over the content that WikiLeaks is sharing. Another way, which is interesting, and I won't get into too much detail about this because I think I don't want to take up too much more time than I have with the presentation, but scatter and recombine. I have a theory, and it's just a theory that I have about insurance file. If you have a file that you want to, even if it's protected with huge encryption, which insurance file is, It would take a long time. I'm sure the government agency is working to break that crypto, but a way in which would be creative to take that is break the real insurance file up into many pieces scattered around the world, and cryptographically kind of protect those pieces. When a certain event occurs, have a centralized server through which all of those pieces come together and are decrypted, and there is whatever file or content that you want to protect. This is one of the reasons I have this theory is that so WikiLeaks has more than one server location inside Sweden. This is all public. There's one outside of Stockholm that's in someone's I think personal residence. They have a really big server there. And why would WikiLeaks need such a huge centralized server? So we did a little bit of analysis, and we're thinking about the idea of taking a big file, and again, I'm not justifying what WikiLeaks is or what they've done, I don't want to get into that, but taking a big file, breaking it apart, you'd need kind of a big server, perhaps, to take all those pieces upon command and put them back together, and to decrypt them particularly. Strategies for distributed data storage. I'm going to skip that slide, but I want to get to the jurisdiction hopping. This is something that happened with Sealand and Havenco with jurisdiction hopping. As I mentioned in Virginia, as soon as the data touches a server in the US, they have some jurisdiction over that. Where it came from, what it is, they're going to try to decrypt it if it's something that they care about. So what we've done with a case that I have is what's called jurisdiction hopping. I got tired of the violation of the DMCA takedown notices, so I put the stuff in Sweden. I'm not obstructing justice. That can be, the doctor here who had issue with this speech could go to Sweden and file. He didn't, but he could. And maybe it was more expensive for him than it would have been serving us and people here or in California, but it's legal, we did it. And that's how jurisdiction hopping is done. I know that in countries such as in UAE, some people have talked to me saying, hey, they have a file, some information that they put in other countries. Battery?
Yeah, I can change it real quick.
Okay, I'll just keep going. So one of the things that they've done is they put it here in the US. The US has protections that they don't have over there. So they put it here on a server, they pay for the service, they use Tor to get to and from the site, and they cryptographically protect any information that's going between the stuff here and in Abu Dhabi or Bahrain or wherever they are. And it works that way. And that's one thing that's hard for law enforcement is to or for government in Iran or overseas to get jurisdiction to capture that stuff and figure out exactly who it's from, where it's going. It's like, it's a tunnel, really. Offshore platforms. In 2000, it took about $2 million to set up Havenco and Sealand. What this is, and I have a picture of it here, but it's a platform in the North Sea off the shore of the UK. And it was a former gunnery post in World War II. It was a pirate radio station and later became a location platform for computers. And the guys who set it up, Avi Freeman and Ryan Lackey, are fantastic cryptographers, the best I know in the hacking community, in fact. That's where it is, and that's what it looked like. And I believe in a period of time, they had about 15 to 20 people actually in there. And those pylons that go down into the water, that's where the computers were hosted. When they gave their first interview to Wired magazine in 2000, they said that they filled those rooms with argon gas. Not just because it was to protect the computers or keep them running hot, but it was from running, the servers from running too hot. But it was for really, so if they got raided either by pirates or by, I think they specifically said by any government entity that didn't like them, you would be hard to do. They'd actually have to put on gas masks, go in to take the servers out. And then later he said, and they do have this, they have a very large room with a lot of guns. And when you claim you're your own country, that you have, the UK and the US has no jurisdiction over your stuff, the guns and weapons you have in that room, I mean, the stuff that I have read and talked to Ryan about them having were pretty extraordinary, like missiles. I mean, it was a big deal. They had to actually defend themselves from real, like, pirates, and I'm not talking about, like, copyright pirates. I'm talking about the guys with the guns on the boat that are like, we want your platform, we're taking all your computers. And the prince was kidnapped by pirates, taken somewhere to, like, Norway, I don't remember. And somehow he fought the pirates, made his way back to the platform, took the platform back over by force, ousted the pirates, and took it back. So, so the guns were not just for protecting against the US government or the British Navy showing up with their big ships and their huge guns, because they would not make it still. We have more firepower than they do. But it was kind of a statement that if you come in to get our stuff, we're gonna fight you for it. And he initially said, if you get close to taking it, we're gonna go down with it. We're gonna blow the place up, and it's rigged with explosives. He later said, that's really not the case. We're really not going to go down for your stuff, sorry. But this was after the company had folded. This is the Principality of Sealand. They still are there. Okay, now the hackers and the cyberpunks are not there. But the people who are there is the king, the queen, and these are the Bates family. They've been there since the 60s as pirate radio operators, and the prince is still there. And he's probably in his like 40s or 50s right now. But they're still there, and Havenco, the company, is not. But anyway, they say they don't respect or take any subpoenas or warrants. Although after September 11th, they did send a statement to the U.S. government saying, if there is some type of terrorism that you think is going through the computers here, we will work with you on that. But up until 2001, that was not. They publicly stated that wasn't the case. And there's Ryan Lackey, and their slogan for that Havenco, the company, was "The free world just milliseconds away." And that's an aerial view of it. It's not very big. And this is a view inside. If you listen to Ryan Lackey's presentations about what it's like to live in that place, it's really quite fantastic. Fantastic in the sense that, I mean, they're 15 guys living in this tiny place for like 3 months at a time. And if you fall into the North Sea, like you're blown off the platform, you have something like less than 5 minutes to be fished out or you die. So it is a very hostile place to set up a data haven, but in some sense, that was part of the threat. They have their own currency, they have their own stamps, they have their own passports. And actually, when Ryan came to present at Hackers on Planet Earth, and this must have been like 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, he had a Sealand passport on him. And he does not use that when he comes through JFK. I think that would be, he would be held up in customs for quite a while. Because obviously the US does not recognize this as being a sovereign nation. They have an autonomous contract. Their contract was pretty much like, as long as it's not illegal, it's not child porn, you can put anything on your computers. It's like a don't ask, don't tell policy, though. If they don't find it when they're upgrading their stuff that you're a terrorist or doing something like child pornography, they won't actively look for it, but if they find it, they'll take your stuff and keep your computers. Those were the laws of Havenco. Oh, and there's the prince on the left-hand side. Prince Roy, I believe is his name, and that's Ryan on the right. This is interesting. It took a while to dig to find this, but this is the World War, when this platform was built, this is what it looks like. This is what is a problem for them claiming that they're a sovereign nation. If you look at the bottom, that is a boat. The way that this thing was built is it was built to be a platform that wasn't actually physically connected to the continental shelf. And I'm not going to get into international law of the sea and all that, but it's sitting on the seabed. It was a boat that was dragged out and really sunk, and then the top part stayed up above the water, and they put all the guns on it for World War II. An international law, international jurisdiction, for an island to be an island, it depends on how it's affixed to the continental shelf. Well, here's one of the things that the UK is saying, this is our thing we built. When I talk to you about what do you own, this is ours. We brought it out there, we sunk it, you're just squatting on it, and they took it under something similar to what we have here in the US called adverse possession. In the US, if you squat on your neighbor's land and your neighbor cannot be the government because the government this never works for, it just legally doesn't work. But if you squat on your neighbor's land, and I think in Virginia it's up to 22 years, you're openly doing this, notoriously doing it, you put up a fence, you build a house, you live there, you will own it. You can go to court and take possession of that piece of land after 22 years. So if you find your neighbor, like their fence is encroaching on your property, get them to move it because they could own it after 22 years, so don't be lazy about it, or you'll end up like this. All right, so the UK was lazy, and now they're kind of having issues with the Bates family out there, who are still out there, but Ryan is somewhere in the Middle East, and Avi Friedman is still doing some interesting crypto work. International jurisdiction over Havenco. One of the things when the Digital Millennium Copyright Act came out, there was this big thing that people were going to put all their content on Havenco servers. Well, you can imagine one of the weaknesses if you set up your own island somewhere is how do you get internet access that's fast enough, especially with all the data that we transmit now. I mean, video. I mean, how do you do that over Havenco? They had a single cable under the ocean that they had laid to supply the internet access for Havenco. The problem is when the UK says, okay, you're done, ISP, we have all the warrants here, just shut off their internet access. If you've spent thousands to put your stuff out there, that's really vulnerable. They were going to do a satellite uplink, but that's really slow, even especially back in 2000. So they didn't really have a backup. So if the UK decided we're going to commercially cut off your internet access, your data haven is pretty much dead. So what happened to Havenco? You can get Ryan Lackey's perspective. He gave a DEF CON and Hackers on Planet Earth presentation about this. It was really financial what killed it. Ryan and Avi spent, well, as some of us may have done in 2000 to support a startup company, they put it on their personal credit cards. So when the prince decided they weren't going to quite pay them back, the company folded. So it was really over something financial, not, not something legal. And in 2008, Prince Michael declared that he would never sell the micronation to anything like Pirate Bay. Pirate Bay did make an offer, they wanted to buy it, and they said no. So right now, actually, they've had 2 fires on Sealand within the past 5 years, and it's almost like it's like a death trap if you're caught in there. So who did they call? This is one of the things you don't want to do if you're setting up your own country and claiming you're a sovereign nation. They called the British Navy to come help them put the fire out, and they did. And I believe the British Navy billed them, and I would advise if Sealand wants to claim their principality, you pay that bill because you're not a citizen of the UK. The other downside that's been happening for a long time is everyone there has, in the UK they have socialized medicine. What happens when you're like a card-carrying member of a socialized medicine country, you have your health insurance card, you're a citizen, and the Bates family they are covered by their socialized medicine plan there, so weakness there for talking about your own micronation. All right, next step. So from what happened in 2000, the next step is going to be this, and I see this happening. It sounds still science fiction, as the picture, seriously suggests. But there are people with the Seasteading Institute out of San Francisco, the same group that funded PayPal. PayPal was created initially to kind of get around a lot of the regulatory issues with US banks. And PayPal is something that we use, not for that reason, but for Exploit Hub, because they handle a lot of stuff, but it was initially set up to kind of get outside of one nation, one country saying, your bank is physically located here, we're going to take jurisdiction over all the transactions there. PayPal still obviously abides by US laws, but it was set up to be something sort of autonomous from the regular banks. And so anyway, seasteading is interesting. And someone has suggested that for $2 million and a bunch of recycled bottles, you can set up an island. And of course, the first groups that said we're going to do it, guns, computers, and women were the reasons that people were going to set this up in the middle of the ocean. So this is going to be a challenge. And what someone's saying, is that a problem?
That's my dreamland.
Well, if it's your dreamland, this is going to be interesting. In the future, just like you have your character perhaps on Second Life, and it's what you want it to be, and you belonged in groups in World of Warcraft and all that, perhaps in the future we'll have some kind of citizenship in the country in which we were born, but maybe our work and personal and social and whatever affiliations will be on some offshore platform somewhere where we have all of our computers, which kind of compromise. I mean, this is kind of my home, my laptop is, and I travel a bit, but everything that I do that's important is here, and if you take that to an offshore platform, maybe that is going to be your next country or your group affiliation. But International Cyber Criminal Cops Without Borders, this is something that the US government is working on, is to make it easier for the FBI and other law enforcement agencies here in the US to work with Interpol, sharing information, resources, and people to try to make sure that the platform that's set up with giant Stinger missiles, well, it's going to be an interesting question. Is it something that we want to support, or something that in international waters they're going to go as far as changing international law of the sea? Takes an international effort to do. It's not just something the US can say, we're going to say all the oceans are ours. It's not going to happen, and that's why stuff's going out there. And that's why it's going to be very hard for international cybercrime, cyber cops to kind of do what they do. So, kill switching the internet, I'm going to skip this part in essence of time, excuse me, but I don't believe it's possible we can do that here in the US unless we set up a whole new structure of how the internet is set up. In the US, it's more organic. In China, on the other hand, the way their internet access was set up, there are about 12 choke points, more or less, a handful of choke points on the China's network, but it's kill switching here in the US is not going to happen. If the government sets up their own type of internet structure, which they've been talking about doing, especially for protected computers, that's a different issue. But for all of us, if they say cut off all internet access for Northern Virginia because there's a huge attack coming out of coming out of here or attacking here, I mean, we may be cutting off some of our important, access for computers for the military as well. We just don't really know what's going to happen. One of the projects we're doing here at the Hackerspace is we're setting up a cyber war simulation type of thing. We're going to play around with this here in the space on like a black hole network, of course, to see what we can do with it. But a quick one example, and there are some others with affiliations with Latvia in this room, I do know that, but Latvia was cut off from the internet, an entire ISP, and a researcher said this may be one of the top European centers of crap. And so there are a lot of malware, malicious sites, attacks, botnets coming out of Latvia because they're not as strict with what goes over their ISPs over there. So setting up something that's bulletproof or how to get to where Zeus bot-making software is being shared is hard to do. And so Latvia just said, okay, we're just cutting off like a lot of people in Latvia just because we can't control what's going on. I think it was Zeus, in fact, that they were having issues with over there. I'm going to skip that. Protecting cyberspace as an asset. Oh, China may be the only country that has the ability with the Great Firewall to do what some politicians are talking about of kill switching the internet. All right, so to wrap up here, an island of hackers, cyberpunks, or techno geeks, you take your pick. Maybe in the next 10 years, we'll be able to decide really what communities, just like this hackerspace, just like the hackerspace movement actually internationally, the group with which we have our friendships, our social and even business networks may be more so than we're US citizens. Maybe it'll be like we're participants in unallocated space, reverse space, and if geographically and physically that type of place is offshore and you can get to it, that's going to be an interesting new concept of liberty and freedom and where you call home. So, in a world in which laws are defined by IP addresses or GPS coordinates only, lawyers and cyber police are playing catch-up and will remain to do so if they stay steeped in traditional criminal and intellectual property laws. Our society, our organization has changed. As a hacking community, we are ahead and they're playing catch-up. And we need our legislatures to understand that some things need to be changed to help law enforcement catch up with some of the bad guys, however that may be defined. But property ownership gives the future citizen a way in which he can be his own island. So just like Voltaire, you may be able to digitally be your own island. And in fact, there's some places now where you can do that. Whether you share your stuff or you set up like a super intellectual property group, on another island, it doesn't matter. It'd be nice that we'd have the choice to do some of that. So, anyway, that is my presentation on international cyber law and jurisdiction. I'm on Twitter a lot. My email address, Exploit Hub, Recursion Ventures, my email address is up there. If you want to reach me, that's a good way to do it right there. And I have an office in DC, but actually right back there in the corner behind that door is my office for Exploit Hub. Yeah, there we go, thank you. I think it's William. Exploit Hub, Recursion Ventures, and my law firm. So if you're in here working on some projects and you want to know, gee, is what I'm doing legal? Come find me, I'm going to be here. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we're going to bring up our next speaker.